Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you.
Hi, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is not my usual podcast co-host and business partner, Tom, but it is the lovely Anna-Marie Watson, who is joining us today to tell us about a different coaching approach that we haven't yet covered on the podcast, which is coaching out of doors. So I'm going to say hello, Anna-Marie. Good morning. And I'm going to do a quick introduction before we get chatting. Happiest outdoors, Anna-Marie is an accredited coach and coach supervisor who loves to escape the confines of four walls and take those coaching conversations out into nature. She's a former army officer and has worked in, and I love this, worked in challenging environments from the Arctic tundra right through to hot sandy deserts. So that's quite extreme ends of the spectrum. And I know, Anna-Marie, that you're on a bit of a mission to encourage coaches to step outside, and you also co-host the Coaching Outdoors podcast as well. So welcome to our podcast today. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Me too. And a big thank you for the invitation to be here. And thank you to your listeners for listening in and taking an interest in coaching outdoors and partnering with nature. And the fact that you're supporting my mission, which is ultimately to encourage more coaches to head outdoors. So this is all part of the ripple effect. So if this is something that you're interested in, like sit back and listen and soak it up and think about how this could maybe shift, change, shape your practice and ultimately be in service to your clients in a slightly different way.
Your background is Army officer, and then you've trained as a coach. How did that come about, that transition?
Yeah, the transition from Army life to civilian life is definitely an interesting one, which I will very much hands up admit that I was particularly naive about. And actually, I do think through that naivety, sometimes you just get on and do it. And I ultimately joined the military because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. What I did know was that I didn't want to be in an office. I grew up in the northeast of England. I was pretty much free range. It was very much growing up in the 80s and the 90s, exploring, building dens, just roaming the allotments behind the house that I lived in. And, school, as much as I loved it, and it was very much, when can I get out? So for me, being out in nature, being outside is a place where I feel free. I feel centered. I feel grounded. I feel held. And actually, for me as a human being, then how can that translate into my coaching? Clearly, when I left the Army, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Again, a bit of a theme here during the Army because I didn't know what I wanted to do. Left the Army, still didn't really know what to do, and fell into leadership development. That was the last role that I did in the military, and I loved the people. And actually, what I found again and again and again, the thread was the people. And I actually now circuit back that my basic coaching was when I was a junior officer, with my soldiers on the vehicle part, probably getting in the way, but it was all about listening and it was all about asking questions. And that is very much the grounding for my coaching, though I didn't know it at the time. I didn't even know what coaching was. When I left the Army, if you'd suggested maybe working with a coach, I'd have looked at you completely confused and probably come out with some idiot statement like, I'm not broke, I don't need fixing, I don't need any help. Which that was who I was now. And I find it quite ironic now, 14 years later, that I'm sat here as a coach, and I love it. I absolutely love my job.
Wonderful. And it's lovely because you can hear the passion in your voice, and, your whole demeanor lights up, and it's just lovely to hear that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because talking to Tom, and had a background in many years ago in a different industry, and he always says it was the people, it was the talking to people that is the thread that goes through his work. So even if you've done something entirely different, and our listeners are primarily doctors, and it's the people, that they are there for and to help, and they want to listen to. So it's lovely to hear that you've taken that thread and found where it creates your life tapestry, I suppose, which is lovely. So I suppose there'll be lots of people who are listening who think, oh, this sounds great. I'll be able to get outdoors. I love being outdoors. Some people who might find that's stepping out of their comfort zone a little bit with coaching. How is coaching outdoors different to coaching not outdoors in whatever capacity, whether it's online or office?
And I really want to acknowledge that this is not for everybody. And even some coaches who love the outdoors, the thought of working outdoors and partnering with nature for them, it doesn't fit. So it's a real inquiry into you and your relationship with the outdoors and with nature. And that's where I encourage anybody who's maybe dabbling, interested in this area. Okay, well, where does that start from? What does it give you? And, ultimately coaching is coaching, whether you're doing it, sat down, online, indoors, outdoors, walking. And, within the podcast, I feel incredibly privileged to have interviewed over 75 different coaches who pull on their experiences, but also coach in so many different ways outdoors. And we've had some people who it is much more of a walk and talk. So actually, there isn't anything else brought in. It's two people walking alongside. And actually, that side by side in itself is extremely powerful. And I would suggest that is a big difference from being indoors. Indoors, sat down, whether you've angled the chairs or you're opposite. Actually, that dynamic of being outdoors, and if you're walking alongside someone, it's like you sink into that synchronicity together, like the cadence of your pace. And that is that embodied connection with the individual. And, I've spoken to many parents who say that they have conversations with their children when they're driving. There's something that is, it's more connecting, it's less confrontational when you are side by side as opposed to face to face. There is some, a theory that suggested it's maybe because you're not like head to head, your vital organs aren't exposed. So maybe on a kind of unconscious level, you feel a bit safer as well. So, the beauty of outdoor coaching is the diversity of it. And actually, any coaching that you can do indoors, you can actually bring outdoors as well. So a lot of coaches, whether they're trained in some psychometric tool or some theory or model, whether that is systemic, whether that is team coaching, whether that is NLP, you can take all of that into the outdoor space and use it. And I find being outdoors in nature, the creativity that can come through is absolutely phenomenal. And it really, all it depends is where are you able to go? Where do you feel confident to go as a coach? And then have that ability to extend the invitation to your client. And it is all invitational. I think no one's forcing anyone to do anything. And ensuring that your client feels comfortable and feels safe is at the heart of it. Because ultimately, as soon as you step outside, there is an element of risk. You're not indoors, you're not in four walls. There is an unknown, there is an uncertainty, which I find that's what life is. Like stepping outdoors, it is, it's chaotic, it's unpredictable. You don't know who you might encounter, you might know what you encounter. And that in a way is a bit of a metaphor for life as well. And conversely, to what extent do you need a container to be able to hold the coaching conversation as well? So that there is a psychological safety within it, there is an agreement, because not everybody feels safe outdoors. And I have had some clients who actually being outdoors is scary, or parts of nature are scary. For some, standing on top of a windset mountain in a massive big expanse in front of them, that can be really, really exposing. They prefer to be held maybe by the trees. And conversely, for someone else, if they're in the trees, that can be maybe quite claustrophobic. And who knows what's hiding behind a tree. So there is, a lot of the belief systems come into this as well that, consciously you might not think about straight away, but ultimately it is beneath the surface and really needs to be taken into consideration. So I'm going to pause for breath now. I'm super conscious we've got so much time and I can talk for hours about this.
It's so interesting. So many things have struck me from what you've said, because it would be easy to just say you pick your coaching up and you go outside, but it's so much more nuanced than that, isn't it? And the two things that have jumped out from those things that you've said, firstly, that we've sort of pigeonholed this podcast into our section on approaches to coaching, because we have themes on our podcast episodes. So we do models, we do tools, we do interviews, we do approaches, we do things that people might bring to the coaching space and challenges that we might find in the coaching room. So we've put this into the approach to coaching, but actually what you're saying is whatever your approach to coaching, potentially you can add in that extra layer of being outdoors. So whether you're a Gestalt coach, a positive psychology coach, or anything else, you can take it outdoors. So I think that's the first thing that jumped out is it's not really an approach, it's another layer almost.
And with that, again, this whole kind of definition of, outdoor coaching, the term itself for some people doesn't sit. For some, it's nature connected, it's nature inspired. It's green coaching, it's eco coaching. And again, labels subjectively, what do they mean? What do they mean to you? How do they link with your client to get buy-in? So there's a piece around that, whether and it links back to, like, in a way, your identity as a coach heading outdoors. And for some, it might just be, actually, we are just going for a walk and talk. We're not integrating any of nature. It is all purely unconscious. And actually, just by being outdoors, by moving, we know that, whether it's the vitamin D, whether it's the movement, whether it's the fresh air, whether it's the soundscape, it's having benefits. It's down-regulating us. It's working with our, nervous system and causing us to be relaxed, to be more open, to be more creative. And actually, just then unconsciously, I'm bringing that into the coaching conversation, and it's held within the space. Or you can go really the other end, and actually you're co-creating with nature, and you are bringing in, whether it is the trees, whether it is the animals, whether it's, earth as a stakeholder, and that's a part of the wider conversation in the way that you bring the contract at the very, very beginning. So it's huge. Like, coaching outdoors, partnering with nature is absolutely massive. And I think the more people bring their interest into it, it gets even more. I've talked with people who are really into adventure, people who are really into mindfulness, people who are into pilgrimages. And again, there is just so much opportunity, which I love.
Yeah. Before I forget, the other element that I picked up on, as you say, we could talk for hours, was the fact that there are some things that are generally taught in coaching where, from what you've said, there's the opposite happening. So we talk about being face to face, having eye contact, building rapport, holding that space. So there's the eye contact versus walking side by side, which is in contrast to what we'd normally learn. And then there's the holding space and being in that container, if you like, and then going out and physically and visually that falling away. And I tend to work very energetically, if you like. I have a sense of and a feeling of an energetic container as more of a metaphor, I suppose. So I suppose I feel like I'm taking that container with me, but there is still that visual and physical removal, like you say, of those four walls. So there's some interesting dichotomies there, isn't there, to how we would normally learn to coach, and then how practically you would take that outdoors and use those opposites in a different way.
And I mean, the whole body language and rapport. So my coaching was initially grounded in neuro-linguistic programming. So that was a huge part of my my initial coaching journey, and it's still there. And just because you maybe can't visually see it, your eyes are locked on. It's that other sense. And I think the way that you brought in the energy is absolutely key. Like, you're sensing into the energy of the person next to you, and the way that people move, I've had some clients who've disappeared off on a brisk walk, and I'm kind of like trying to keep up with them. And others who actually you just grind to a halt, and you're just stood maybe in a much more reflective state. So this is where, coaching outdoors, it's like, oh, we're going for a brisk walk. And yes, for some people, I can get my 10,000 steps in at the same time, win-win. And actually, let's be inclusive about this. Being outdoors can just be sat outdoors. And for some people, that is all that is actually physically possible. And there are still the benefits of doing that. So I just really want to open that up. I'm sat in a garden studio while we're recording this, and it's got these beautiful big panel windows. And again, it's almost like the outdoors is indoors. So I think there's a really important part to make about bringing the outdoors in when you can't get out, And whether that is through visuals, maybe having your, Zoom backdrop, kind of a green, or bringing the imagery in. Maybe it's having plants in the background. Maybe it is actually within the metaphor, within the language. So it's not totally exclusive, like I have to be outdoors. It is this nature connection element as well that I really want to invite in as well, because ultimately we are nature.
Mm. And it's so healing, and we know the benefits of being out in those green spaces.
And blue spaces, thinking about nature and the different landscapes where you can go outside. And, I appreciate most of us live in urban areas, and there can be opportunity. Is it more the parks? Is it more the water? Yes, we do live in more grey landscapes. And actually, well, where is the green and the blue within that? And, if blue health coaching, if that is something that you are interested in, I would love to just signpost the work of an amazing coach who lives down in Cornwall, Lizzie Larblister. Hopefully I pronounced her surname right. And her life is so in attunement, which as a coach and the way that she lives, she runs a seal sanctuary as well. And she's so invested in ocean advocacy. So it just shows that how, as a coach, how, particularly when you're on your early days, your early getting into coaching, that it reflects the authentic you, and you're really aligning it with your values so that your identity as a human being on this beautiful planet, work, life, coach, doctor, it's all one. So when you're showing up in service to your client, you're genuinely there. And I'd really, just to illustrate this, so when I first left and the military and worked out in the Middle East within leadership development, I moved back to the UK in 2015 and really set up my business. And when I started, I very much was like, well, who am I as a coach? Oh, I'm going to be, target the corporate market and, suited and booted. And but it wasn't me. I wasn't in coherence with myself. And I'm sure that as I was, I'm going to use the word desperately pitching my business, that clients could see through, because I wasn't being true to myself. And in a way, I look around in 2015, particularly in 2010, 2015, no one was like coaching outdoors that was visible that I could find. So I didn't have any role models. I didn't know it was a thing, that anyone was even doing it. And yet I knew that when I was doing my coach training, do any peer conversation, I'd be like, can we go for a walk around the block? Can we even just stand up and look out of a window? And I know that for me, it's because I'm very embodied. For me to get out of my head and to be more grounded and connected, I need that kinesthetic kind of movement. So I knew that, and I'd done it in my coach training, but then there was no coaches doing it. So so it took a while for me to then get the courage to actually, with a client who I was working with already, when I was on the Southwest in Bristol, I was like, should we take this outside? And they were totally game for it. And again, that's when you know that there is the clientele, like that they fit. They're the ones that you want to be working with, because they get it. It's like, you don't have to sell it, you don't have to explain it. It's on their wavelength.
I love that idea that we can step into more authenticity by perhaps doing things a little bit differently, in alignment, but also that then informs our coaching clients, or the type of coaching clients we'll attract. Because I absolutely think that you will draw the right people to you, and they'll then be in alignment, or at least open to the idea of doing things in that different way. I know this is going to be just an introduction for many people to, whet their appetite. And we're going to put all your links so that people can connect with you on social media and with your podcast. We'll put those in the show notes. What would you say would be the biggest challenge in terms of taking that conversation outside?
And I think for me, the challenge word, it's almost okay, well, what is a challenge? Who is it a challenge for? And for me, where I am now, and I can connect that back to where I was when I described it at the beginning of my journey. Yes, it was a challenge because no one else was doing this. And I was like, is this a thing? Can I have permission to do this? Like, who do I get permission from? Oh, it's me. Okay, I can give myself permission to do this. Okay, let's go. So the challenge was me. Like, I kind of had to get over myself. And yes, I do believe that within, the corporate inverted commas business world, work is done indoors, sat down, attached to a computer. There is, a high degree of presenteeism when we look across a lot of industries. It's like people have to be there. And this very much harks back to the 19th century where people were clocking in and out of factories. Now we are knowledge workers. It's not the time that matters, it's the creativity. And actually, what can our brains really be innovative and create? And that's how we're going to differentiate. And this is going to be fascinating as we move and AI has even more impact. But ultimately, it meant that outdoors, and this is embedded within English psyche, like outdoors is for leisure. It's where we go to in our free time to maybe play. And again, there's that dichotomy between play and work. Like, oh no, we're here to work. Work is serious. We can't have fun. Like, oh, we go outdoors. Well, you can't work outside. It doesn't mix. And this is very much almost, our brains like to categorize it. Things go in boxes. It makes sense. So yes, the outdoors, particularly in the business world, where you might go outdoors for maybe like a team building event once a year or something, or it might be the outdoor adventure industry, which is frankly massively underpaid. So then as coaching outdoors, well, where do you fit? Because you're an anomaly. So it's unusual. So I'm going to really now caveat that with COVID, because COVID has made a difference. And it is still making a difference now. And I believe it's going to make more of a difference in the next 5 to 10 years, because people during COVID wanted to get outside and people's perceptions around nature are changing. That said, the UK being the most, nature depleted country in Europe, we're not exactly doing very well. And when we take a big step back and actually look at nature connection and how much time people spend outdoors, there was a survey done that actually inmates in prison spend more time outdoors than our children do. So actually our connection with nature it's scarce, it's rare. So then when we look at the younger generation coming through as well, they're spending even more time indoors and more time on screens. So, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and yes, I have these little pink glasses of looking back of, being outdoors as much as possible. And clearly moving through the generations, the younger generation now aren't going to have that. So it's a really kind of complex time. So I do think there is a challenge around perceptions about, and the tendrils are still there about, well, work is indoors, needing to be seen, to be present in the office. Or online, so I can see that you're on Teams. Living in the UK, the second challenge that always gets mentioned, and I'm sure this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, is, drum roll, the weather. I would just really respond to that. There's nothing, there's no such thing as poor weather. It's only inappropriate clothing. So again, you can plan around it. And I get it. Some people want to be comfortable indoors. So we are all different. And again, I work with some clients on a bit of a hybrid indoor online. I'm going to now admit that I do have a camper van. So my plan B, and I would encourage everyone to have a plan B, and that does not mean everyone has to go and buy a camper van office, but have a plan B, whether it's a backup coffee place that you can pop into, or whether it's even just changing the route, because walking along an exposed path is very different from sheltering in some trees. So there are differences there. So you can navigate the weather. And, yes, other challenges. And again, it comes down to the planning, whether it's it's the route, it's getting lost, it's what about my safety? Am I meeting somebody who I don't know? Clearly me as a petite female, I may be meeting a male for the first time. What's the safety implications of that? But there is all workarounds. And this is where I come down to this idea of, okay, if there's a challenge, it's what is the risk? And what is our attitude to the risk? And actually, what is the reality of the risk? How can we name it? How can we mitigate it and put things in place to ensure that it is lowered and worked through? And then there we go. So this is my pragmatic army officer and expedition leader coming through. Risk assessment and then dynamic risk assessment on the ground.
Excellent. And we haven't got time to go into all the details of this today, which is such a shame. But as I say, we're going to put your details in the show notes, and I'm hoping that these are things that you generally talk about on your podcast or in your blogs, or there'll be information that people can connect with through you, I'm guessing.
Very much so. Very much so. Like I am on a mission here, and I have been since 2015. And I love the opportunity to partner with different individuals, organizations to share. So there are resources out there. There's the excerpts that I've contributed to different handbooks. And I really want to give a shout out to Leslie Roberts. So Leslie Roberts, she has the Coaching Outdoors Handbook, which is an amazing resource. So I'd really recommend that as a first option. So there's some resources there. Yes, the podcast as well. I set that up. It'll be 4 years ago at the end of January, actually,
Wow.
with Alex Burnt. If you've not come across the podcast and this conversation has piqued your interest a little bit, please do check it out. And would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Please do use me as a resource. Like this is something that I'm super passionate about, if you hadn't guessed. Please do reach out. Any questions, I'm more than happy to have a chat, jump on a call, etc.
I do know that we have some of our trained coaches who've gone on to run retreats up in Scotland and in all sorts of different places, and they all do lovely different things with their coaching, as well as integrating it into the NHS and into their roles within the medical community. So I'm sure we'll have lots of interest. And of course, we have listeners who aren't all doctors. They just like to listen to the coaching side of it. I remember someone saying that they once worked with someone while they were out walking, and they just let them lead the pace. And they said that where they were, there was a path, a well-trodden path, but this person, in talking about the dilemmas that they had, the options, the challenges, they started going off the path and they started walking through this really kind of uneven surface surrounded by leaves and debris and through trees. And she said she was just walking along with them and kind of observing this and thinking, well, hold on, the easy path is over there. And yet you've taken this odd path through all of this, these obstacles, and you're talking about the obstacles and challenges. And it was just a wonderful metaphor and provided with another opportunity to give feedback in the way we might say, oh, your face lit up when you talked about this. She was able to say, I'm just observing the choice of path that you've taken. What do you notice about this path versus the path you've taken? And so I thought that was a lovely example of how coaching outdoors can sort of blend in and facilitate some of the coaching that you can do. And I wondered what other events, I suppose, what other things come to mind where you've had a similar experience?
And the metaphor is so rich, and it goes beyond the head and the words because it is lived, it's embodied, it's visceral, it's deep within the muscle memory, the senses, just on so many levels. And I had a conversation with a client down by the canal. I love the canal and the water. And often doing out and back, and that in itself, the turning around. So when you're going out, it's more the imagining, the dreaming, the possibilities. And then that turnaround point, that's the decision point. That's when things change. That's when you get more solution focused and you're kind of coming back and towards. So you're kind of moving away from extant options, and then commitment coming back towards. So that just is one shift, and then another is bringing the emotions into it. And working with a client, and anger came in, and I then extended the invitation to select something to throw into the canal. Early morning safety, clearly dynamic risk assessment and all that going on. And they selected this rock and just stood there, and you could see them holding it, like channeling the energy into this rock. And then
Wow.
Splash. And that whole sequence, and then observing their state afterwards, there'd been a noticeable shift. and then be able to reflect on that, then there'd been a release. And yeah, I think in both of those around, turnaround points and emotional release rock, that it will stay with them. That presence, it's more than a memory, it's a presence, it's a lived presence, and they can anchor back into that, which is really powerful.
Amazing. I've loved this, and I think that what's really jumped out is this differentiation between taking a conversation outdoors versus what you termed partnering with nature, and then that really integrating into the coaching. And there's two very different types of coaching outdoors. And I think that I don't, despite having spoken before with you about it and been to your Coaching Outdoors conference earlier, or back last year in 2024, I hadn't really clearly clicked that those were two very definite approaches to use the outdoor space in two very different ways. So it's been great to hear that from you.
And I liken that to a spectrum. And I've got a little model that I've kind of designed that it's almost, okay, well, is it just we are outside? We're outside, woo. Or is it actually, okay, we are one with nature, we are nature? And that can be too much for some people. That was too much for me when I started. I was very much like, let's just get outdoors. I like to move. I feel free. And it's been an evolution within my coaching. As a coach, I'm still maturing. I'm still growing. I wouldn't want to be stagnant. That would be so dull. So for me, curiosity drives so much. And it's about me. It's giving myself permission. If you'd asked the coach me back in 2011 to stand with a client and invite them to pick a rock and channel the anger in this way and throw it, I wouldn't have looked at you as if you were absolutely barking mad. And that's all my stuff. Like, that's my beliefs that I've had to unpick and challenge and work through, which has been hard. And it is so liberating at the end of it. And actually, it means that I'm able to be in service and support my clients in a very different way of being alongside, as opposed to the doing. Oh, I'm doing coaching. And it's like, I'm showing up as a coach. Like, I'm me, I'm on a coach or not. And it flows.
Yeah, I love that. So yes, I got that wrong. Then it is that spectrum, and I like that differentiation, that clarity that you've given on that. So thank you so much. I mentioned your Coaching Outdoors conference, and I know you've got another one.
Yes, I was going to go. I was going to say, please, can I mention, because I completely forgot, because I get so excited. This year we're going big, we're going bigger. So it's now going to be 2 days, which is just phenomenal. Come along. Like, tickets are on sales. She'll put the link in the show notes, and would love to see you there and hear about your experiences.
Yeah, lovely. And I believe there's the opportunity to camp as well. So there's even more connection with the earth. Thank you for giving us some more information and to help people to really understand that it's not an all or nothing approach. It's not, I am an outdoors coach or I'm not, that they could integrate some elements. They could venture out, they could start a Coaching Outdoors journey and find what works for them, and develop their coaching and develop themselves as a result of connecting with nature more. So I think that that's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, and a big, big thank you back to you and for everyone else for taking the time to listen. And I'd just love to leave you with, well, okay, where are you going to take this now? And keep us posted.
Yes, and we're actually having a conference in April, and we have the opportunity where people are staying the night before to come and join us the day before for some outdoor coaching. So I hope if this has piqued your interest, you'll be even more intrigued and want to join us for that. So fabulous. Just to let our listeners know that next time on the podcast, we will be looking at a coaching tool, and we will be discussing the SPACE model from cognitive behavioral coaching. So Tom will be back for that, and we will take you through how you can integrate that into your coaching practice. So thanks once again to Anna-Marie, and we will see you all next time on the podcast. Bye for now.
been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.